Hello, everyone. Welcome to the penthouse. That ban list was something. We got Like a Void back, Morphrost Superior is dead, small hits to Lakagon and Frostmill. We've had one event, and now they're announced a new ban list. But in that time, Argo is back. Lynx and Kindleo are back at 3 copies, which means my favorite archetype of deck. The dual color Argo decks are back at essentially full power now. I took this type of deck to Dallas and took it to Cards HQ and won both events with it. I have recreated it for the live stream format, and this is that deck. So instead of doing Earth or Solar or Fire and Thunder, this deck is Fire and Water. We are using Fish to supplement the Kindleo side of the deck, and both halves of this deck is going to be very competent. Essentially, your goal is to start with Fish and then pivot towards the Kindleo side if your opponent gets bigger than the Fish. Let's get right into the deck profile. So starting off with our Fish, we have 3 Aphros, 3 Aphros Champion of Aphrodite, and 3 Magneros. This is very standard for any Fish deck. These guys get up to 5 attack, and that means that it is a very strong tempo. Usually you are going to be casting 2 5s every single turn, and along with that you will be getting multiple draws per turn from your Aphros. This leads to a very strong both board presence and card advantage engine, which should snowball quite nicely into our other half of our deck. Speaking of the other half of the deck, we are on 3 Kindleo. So this deck does take quite a lot of philosophy from my Cards HQ list, where we have Kindleo as our primary fire Celestial. We aren't really supplementing it with too much else, besides things that enable Kindleo. Kindleo, of course, recently got back to 3 copies. It is a very powerful Celestial, and unlike Echolinks, whose role has been shifted from a win condition to a supportive Celestial, Kindleo still remains a win condition. If this card is able to stick for multiple turns, it takes over the game. Its stat line does mean that it does require quite a bit of support in order to stick. Essentially, you want to be getting this down into a late game situation where your opponent likely does not have as many answers to the Kindleo besides combat, in which case you are probably going to have answers to stop that combat. Moving on to our Alestrals that help supplement our game plan. 2 Smoltuga and 1 Torchin. Champion art optional. So once again, building off of the Cards HQ philosophy, the singular Torchin is to be searched off Smoltuga, not really anything else. So this is really a bridge so that Smoltuga is able to search Hestia. Kindleo being cast off of Hestia is very strong. So Smoltuga being able to search Hestia, even indirectly, is quite useful. I will say that this list did feel quite a bit unrefined, even though I did perform quite well with it. This is part of the where I would say the list does feel quite a bit unrefined. I would have liked this third Smoltuga. I would have liked the second Hestia. This part also kind of feels really slow in this meta. Taking a turn to search with Smoltuga for the Torsion, and then having that Torsion be played out and potentially get Gorgon's or Pandora's box really does hurt because you essentially lose 2 turns of tempo, which is devastating in this current format. Our last fire guy, the singular copy of Lavalith. If you're on fire, you should be on Lavalith. This card is still very strong whenever you find it. It punishes Divines quite hard. It is a decent counter to Like a Void. It's not the greatest because it still forces a crash against it, but it is a 6 body, which is something that this deck does not really have outside because the Fish only get up to 5s. Now, our last 2 Alestrals are here for similar reasons. 2 copies of Galaxy Champion beside it, and 2 copies of Astrabbit. Champion art also optional. Galaxy and Astrabbit are here because they are cards that don't really rely on other cards in the deck. Aphoros really wants to see Nexus Bank. Champ Aphoros wants to see other Fish. Kindleo wants to see a Nexus Bank. Torchin wants to see Kindleo. These cards work by themselves in most game states. So that is quite useful to rely on sometimes, just so as a backup plan. Galaxy also helps with our Fish, because our Fish still only get up to 5 attack. Lavalith and Kindleos are meant to help deal with larger Alestrals, but our Galaxies work as an additional way to deal with larger Alestrals. It is also synergetic enough with the fish to not be a true hassle. Once again, this felt fine enough throughout the tournament, but a bit unrefined. Moving on to our runes, we are on 3 Aphrodite and 1 Hestia. 3 Aphrodite is so important for fish because you really want to be seeing her as a way to find more fish and a way to get spirits onto the field for Aphoros. Hestia, of course, is very strong with Kindleo. We are only playing one of it because it's only good with Kindleo, and we are able to search it indirectly with Smoltuga, indirectly with Torchin, but that line does feel a little weak, so it might be justified to actually only play 2 Hestia without the Torchin. Rounding out Invoke runes, we have 2 Ambrosia. This is a dual-colored Argo deck, so having the ability to heal spirits for whichever half you need in the moment is quite useful. The spirit bath is healthy enough to enable each side of the deck once. Ambrosia being there to help enable it one side more is quite useful though. Moving on to our counter runes. 3 Argo. This is what the deck is built around. And then our Argo targets, 2 Necklace of Harmonia. Argo, of course, very good in this Nexus style deck as it gets the Nexus bank for our Alestrals, it changes combat math. It's very strong. The double necklace, it might seem weird, but I have my reasonings for it. This first necklace, obviously, is always necessary if you're running an Argo package. The second one, most people would expect a Torch of Hestia in this spot. But in practice, the ability for the artifact to be a Nexus bank for either Kindleo or Aphoros is really important. If you have a torch, Aphoros can't Nexus off of it. And you really want the 2 spirits for Aphoros as well. Torch is also not doing anything different that Necklace couldn't because it still only buffs attack, but it buffs attack less than Necklace does. So when Necklace buffs attack, it's still meeting that threshold that Torch would. Additional benefit that Torch has in the Foretell isn't quite as useful in this deck because you really want to be using your artifacts as Nexus banks. And realistically, your Hestia is going to have to be on the field, and then the Torch would also be on the field for that second effect to activate, and that leaves a total of 5 targets for that Torch to grab something. You are not grabbing anything off of that Torch. The other option, or even as a potential third artifact to run here, would be Necklace of Aphrodite. That does buff attack to +3, or buff defense to +3, which can be useful, especially with our Smoltugas and Astrabbits. In practice, 1 spirit under that as the Nexus bank is pretty weak for Aphoros, and also you really want Argo to be changing combat math in a way that forces their guy to die. Keeping a guy alive in defense without destroying their guy isn't quite as valuable. Rounding out our counter runes is a pretty standard counter rune lineup. The mandatory 3 days, 2 Pandora's Box, 2 PTA, 2 Snow. 3 days, of course, being mandatory in any deck nowadays. 2 Pandora's Box might seem a little weird. Most people want to play it at 3, especially in Like a Void meta. I don't feel like that's quite as necessary because I feel like the rest of the deck is sufficient enough against Like a Void. And also, this just feels kind of bad into certain matchups. Into other matchups, it does feel quite strong, but it's not. It's generally applicable enough that it can be run at 2. I don't like running it at 3 though. PTA does change combat math fairly often, just that we want some to be playing some of the other counter runes, so playing the 3rd PTA in main is a little hard to justify. And Tsunami is very strong into any deck that is not exactly water. Even into Dionysus, which can play around Tsunami somewhat, it is still very strong. And this is another way that we are able to change combat math favorably against larger Alestrals. Moving on to our Spirit map, we have 3, 6, 9, 10 water, 3, 6, 7 fire, 2 thunder, and a singular wind. This felt fine throughout the tournament. Like I said before, this is enough for either half of your deck to pop off once each. After that, you really need the Ambrosia to really pop off again. With the Aphoros, you will be using 6 spirits usually, and that leaves 4 spirits, which is sufficient enough throughout the rest of the game. Because if they either out it, you are either already in a very winning position, or you are in a very losing position. And so being able to pop up again isn't quite as impactful. Fire Spirits felt fine throughout the tournament. I actually held on to these for quite a while through many games. I would often end up with 6 Fire Spirits left in my spirit deck and no other colors, because I just did not see enough of the Kindleo side of the deck, which might be a flaw that needs to be refined. Two Thunder felt fine. It will only ever feel tight if you get a particularly Thunder heavy hand, which is fairly unlikely. If you do find those hands, generally, unless your opponent has very specific interaction or you get particularly unlucky with your Ash Rabbit finds, you will have other normal casts. So, two Thunder is perfectly sufficient. One Wind is for the side deck cards. Okay, moving on to the side deck, we have 3 Eruption. This is literally just here because into certain matchups, this is just a game-winning card. It is not particularly powerful, I would say. It's not particularly fun to play. But this deck does enable it quite nicely with the fish being able to draw so much. Yeah, I really hope this card gets hit on the next list. It's not fair. A singular copy of Resting on Your Laurels. We are not on Earthquake in the main or the side. And that's simply because the Spirit Mouth is just high enough that fitting the 2 Earth is a little bit hard to justify. This card didn't really perform very well for me. Every single time that I did find it, it was really weak because my opponent would often have a 1-cost Celestial to protect their 2-cost Celestial, and removal is just not as important in this deck because of the Kindleos. And the Argos and Galaxies. Usually you will try to beat your opponent before they're able to get into whatever win condition that they have. Third copy of Ambrosia. Never came in. I just didn't have the matchups where it needed to come in. It can theoretically be nice for like time or against burn decks, but it's also not a nice option to go into when I need to slide out of particular cards, but I don't know what to slide into. Ambrosia's fine. In a more refined list, this would likely not be here. 2 Monsoon of Eurus. This was a counter rune that actually overperformed for me. This was really here for fire decks in particular, but I actually sided this into earth decks quite often, and this was a good card into this. I even hit an Equilynx and a Demeter in the same turn to stop an opponent from even being able to swing over my Alestrals, which was very useful. We are also playing Champ Galaxy, so this does have a little bit of utility with that, but not anything too significant. 3 Shield of Achilles. This is a card that's very good into certain matchups. Into other matchups, it is not as good. I don't really love the idea of putting or doubling up on too many counter runes that only activate in battle, especially when Equilynx is off the list and at 3 copies. It will be popping shields and Argos all the time, so being able to have more chainable back row in the main deck is useful. But into decks like Frost, Shield is a must to spoil. This is more answers to Lockagon. I found that the deck sort of had a struggle against Lockagon in particular, so having more cards that are particularly strong against it is useful. And then finally, third Pandora's Box, third PTA, and third Tsunami. Third Pandora's Box and third Tsunami are very good into certain matchups. Tsunami, of course, being good into any matchup besides Water or even Dionysus. You wouldn't side into the third Tsunami against Dio. Pandora's Box is very good into Dio and some Jank decks. Poison Tipped Arrow isn't quite as applicable, but is good generically enough that if one of the counter runes in the main deck is not particularly strong, PTA slots in quite nicely. So that's the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was very fun to play this deck again. Argo is by far my favorite card in the game. It enables so many cool decks, and these dual color decks are very fun to play with. It's also great that I was able to finally play both of my champion cards together. I'm hoping that Kindleo stays at 3 in this next ban list. So thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.